Today, I'm joined by my friend and someone I admire very much, Bill Sanderson. Bill is a partner at McGuire Woods, where he specializes in trusts and estate law. He helps families think ahead about legacy, about care, and about protecting the people and values that matter to them. While his work is legal in nature, it's also deeply human. At its core, it's about guiding people through complex choices with clarity and compassion, something Bill is tremendously gifted at doing. Bill and I have known each other for years. He's spent his career helping families plan ahead, and as a result, he's also the person they call when they didn't plan ahead for something else, like care. It's in that space, when a thoughtful estate plan meets an unexpected need for caregiving, that our collaboration began. I want to start just by, as we were talking about, thanking you for lending your gravitas to this kind of crusade that I'm doing. I think you know this, but Aging Prepared, which is what I'm calling this podcast and this initiative, was kind of born out of my frustration over many years, watching folks come into our door in an emergent moment and wondering why that was, and feeling like there were patterns that were so similar from family to family, and there were insights we were learning or observing that just felt like, wow, there's minor calibration that could be done here that would have a big impact on folks. And so that led to the development of an Aging Prepared workshop that we've been doing for the last several years, which this kind of podcast or short format is sort of version 2 of that workshop. And it is, frankly, my desire, my crusade, to try to get this information in front of folks wherever they are, as opposed to invite them and ask them to create hours to study ahead, which is a much bigger ask.
Yeah. I think about this thing that tell clients all the time. When a young couple comes in to ask for estate planning documents, they're always worried about leaving their kid at home alone with a grandparent or a caregiver when they're going away for the first time. And so we rush around and we get a will in place and a guardianship designation, because for a young family, what they're worried about is this catastrophic thing happening the first time they're away from their kid. And I'm sure you've done it.
That's
We've all
exactly
done it,
what
right?
we did, yeah.
That's exactly what you do. And after we do it, we get the will signed, the power of attorney, all that stuff signed. I said, okay, now I'm going to give you 3 pieces of advice. This is before I even ever met you. I said, here are the 3 pieces of advice. Number 1, buy term life insurance. You're going to get a lot of pitches for all kinds of investment products and stuff. You need just some simple, cheap term life insurance. Number 2, if you're a high income earner, but you don't have a lot of wealth, think about disability insurance. Again, that's something that we don't like to think about, but is a really important thing. And the third and most important thing I tell people, young couples, families, talk to your parents. Before I even met you, I said, talk to your parents. If you don't need to ask them how much money they have, you don't need to ask them whether they're going to leave their money to you. Make sure that their documents are in order so that they have a plan for who makes decisions for them when they age. Because one of the biggest challenges to a young family is an ancestor getting sick, and it's distracting to a young family. And so I have now expanded on that, and I still say, like, talk to your parents, make sure they have a medical directive and a power of attorney. But I go beyond that and say, when their parents start to show signs of age, I say, you should call my friend Jeff at CommonWise or call somebody in your community where you can start to learn what the services are. It's not just, I was naive initially to think that a power of attorney and medical directive could do it. But it was the advice to a young family of saying, go get prepared. You've got your documents in order, but you're not going to go down in a plane crash when you go away to the beach for the first time. What's going to happen is one of your parents is going to suffer a medical emergency or a cognitive decline, and then you're going to be driving halfway across the state to help them. find a resource in the community where they are. It's the best thing. And your group and other groups like yours have been so helpful to families because it's the young couple that doesn't have a minute to spare in their day between soccer games or gymnastics practice or taking the dog for a walk, and then also to care for a loved one in a different community. It's such a challenge.
So true. I wanted to test a riff against you. Like when I set this up, when I set up this desire to inform, the way that I invariably do it, and I want you to call bullshit on it if it isn't right, but I will say something to the effect of, well-resourced, planning-oriented people have their finances in order, they have their estate in order, they have a team of medical professionals that they know that they leverage, and so they are prepared, except this is a total blind spot for them.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I wanted to do,
I
just
think,
out of self-preservation, is to, like, is it true to say, is that a true statement from your perspective as an estate planner? Like, I'm making this kind of assumption that people do lean into other areas of their planning.
Sure. Well, think about financial advice. It's so prevalent and commodified that people can access it, and we've been trained and learned from a young age with like things like junior achievement in middle school, and you go to high school, you get in the stock club in college or whatever, all of these different ways that you learn to be attuned to your financial plan. And you can't turn on the TV or talk to somebody without finding out something about, have you talked to your broker? Have you thought about this? All the news is about what's happening in the financial market. So we're saturated with information about financial planning. And so people do a lot of it. What I think what you were saying gives me this thought, which is people plan for and spend a lot of time getting ready for low probability occurrences, right? People talk to their financial advisor a couple of times a year because their financial advisor calls them. And really, they're going to invest in a broadly diversified portfolio that's going to go up or down based on what's happening in the macroeconomic environment. They can't change it, right? They're going to have the S&P index or whatever. They're going to have mutual funds. It's going to go up. It's going to go down. They're in it for the long haul, but they worry about it, and they do a lot of effort to plan for their financial future. And in reality, they can't impact that. It's a low probability event that there will be an economic collapse in such a way that they have no money. The market will either go up or down. Likewise, they worry about their own, like a young couple worries about its own planning. What about my documents? The likelihood that you're going to die when you're 30 is very low. You should spend all the time that you focus on estate planning on making sure that you have a good plan for your elderly parents, right? Because that is going to happen. There will be something that you will have to face in dealing with your elderly parents that's much more current than your own estate planning.
It's very interesting.
So I think there's this, what I'm getting at is this idea that we have these ideas baked into our head of low probability events, and we spend a lot of time trying to manage around them when this very high probability event is out there, which is an aging parent is going to suffer some kind of decline, and we need to be ready for it.
It's interesting too, because at the other end of that is, I guess, a question I was going to ask you about was the reality that people seem to be a lot more comfortable planning for their own death, which is a certainty, not a probability. So at the other end of that spectrum,
people don't like thinking about their own death. Not some people don't mind it, but that is a challenge in estate planning, is getting people to think about and realistically consider the world when they're not there.
Okay, let's back up for a second. Just introduce in the most simplest way what you do.
I think that being an estate planning lawyer in a big law firm is the last place you can be something like a general practice lawyer in a big law firm. There are lots of general practice lawyers in small places, but in an estate planning environment, I try to be a resource for my clients on whatever issues are challenging them. It almost always starts from that kernel of estate planning. I need a will. Help me think about what happens to my kids or my assets when I die. That's why people call me. And we try to build a relationship with our clients so that they don't just call us for that, but they call us when they're buying a beach house, or their parents get sick, or they're changing jobs and they need to know something about their retirement plan. We don't do any investing, we don't do any financial advice, but we want them to call us when major life events are happening so that if there's something we can do to help advise or protect, we're in that position to do it. Wealthy families need more help, right? The more assets you have, the more wealth you have, the more you need to do tax planning and other kinds of planning. But we also try to do just the basic estate planning for regular folks. And that's where that advice that I started with is those three ideas. Regular folks people with lots of money have access to resources all the time to solve problems. But if you're just sort of I don't even know what to describe it. It's not exactly middle class. These words are sort of so loaded.
Yeah.
But if you're a regular family, you can't turn on a spigot of resources to solve any problem. And so that's why planning is so important. That's why I encourage people to get ahead of it.
How did you end up? I guess I would like, if I was watching this or listening to this, I'd like some context into how unusual your role is and whether folks, like how easy it is to find a person like you, for a family to find a person like you. But I'm really curious about how you think you ended up in that spot. Like, what is it about your nature? And I'm asking that with an eye towards, I think an observation or an instinct that there are people that are situated like you, that are not attorneys.
Yeah.
But they are they are people that get this call.
Yeah.
Some maybe by virtue of their profession, maybe by virtue of their proximity. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Doing estate planning is not the most popular practice area when you're in law school. They're recruiting lawyers out of law school, and everybody's thinking about, I want that big corporate job in New York, or I want to be a white-collar criminal lawyer in Washington, D.C. And for me, I was sort of always interested in this area. And ancestors have been a big part of my life since I was a kid. And it's strange because 3 of my 4 grandparents died before I ever knew them. I was 2 or 3 years old. And my grandmother, who was alive, had a stroke. And so she was somebody that I went with my dad every Sunday to the nursing home to visit with her. And even though these ancestors were not like, I wasn't bouncing on their knee or playing with them, they were a big part of my life because every Christmas I would go to the cemetery with my mom to decorate the graves of her parents. And every weekend we would go out to the farm that my dad grew up on, and I knew that this piece of land was something my grandfather bought and passed it down to my uncle, and this was a piece. So this idea of ancestors was really in my life. And so I probably was disposed to thinking about those kinds of things when I was in law school and looking for a job. This idea of being the person that people call, separate and apart from you asking me to be here, is something that I've been wondering, like, why am I like this? Why am I in this position? Because there are moments where I have to drop everything because somebody who's in crisis calls me. And I realize I'm the youngest of 3 kids. And somewhere along the line, I was a people pleaser. As the youngest of 3, there were a lot of things going on in my house, and I was trying to make everybody happy when I was 4, 5, 6 years old. And I think that I live that out every day. And there are ways that when you're a people pleaser by nature, that can be a dangerous thing, and you need to learn how to protect your own interests as a people pleaser. And so I've actually learned in my personal life how to be smart about that. But in this, I get to go into this professional life where I get to do it and it's totally healthy. Right at home, I have boundaries and I know how to do all of that stuff to protect myself. But at work, I get to go just be a people pleaser. Somebody calls me, I can drop everything and try to help them in the moment that they're in. And I think I'm comfortable with the vulnerability. Not everybody that goes to law school is comfortable with a client in tears in their office or is willing to just be patient and listen until a client works through the problem and gets to what's really eating at them. Sometimes, type A people want to drive to fix the problem right away. And so I've got this sort of personality and this interest that sort of both led me into this moment. And if there's one of the two things that drives it, it's probably my personality that puts me in the position to be the person that people call. Because they know when they get me, I'll drop everything and it'll be like they're the only person in the world.
Yeah, it's not just the capacity to do it or the resourcing to do it or the intellect to do it, but the inclination to do it.
Yeah, you have to be emotionally present to that. It's exhausting for me. I've realized that if I have a day where I have 3 client meetings back to back to back, I will get home and be
Wiped.
because I am emotionally present to each moment, or I try to be. I don't know if I'm totally, but I don't hold anything back in reserve if I'm in a meeting. And so I've learned to figure out how to sort of get myself straight before I go home. You know what I mean? To sort of
Yes.
rebuild a little bit before I go home.
Yeah.
But it can be a lot. Or if I'm in an all-day meeting with a family, oh boy, I need to just decompress at the end of that.
I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, but I really want to ask how it is that folks that come in and sit with you and go through that experience, this is an impossible question to answer, by the way, how they can why, maybe more than how, they can get through a process like that with good guidance and good intentions.
Yeah.
And nonetheless permit a blind spot about the moment where they're going to go from an acceptable sort of situation to an unacceptable situation in terms of their care needs.
Yeah.
They're looking forward, and they know that there's at least a possibility. Certainly, in many cases, we are
Yeah.
in our head painting a rosier picture about the probability of that possibility. But they know that that's a possibility, and yet I think the vast majority still end up unprepared for that transitional moment
Yeah.
between not needing care and needing care.
Yeah. I mean, 2 things. Life, right? They feel like when they come to me, I can present a document to them that they sign, a will or a trust or a power of attorney. It's like, all right, I'm done. And then they can go on and do the lots of other things that are on their list in life, right? Everybody's got too much to do. And so I think and the simplest explanation is with a legal document, there's like a point of conclusion and you can feel like the job is done. And after that, it's so hard to break through the noise of everyday life to then sit down and focus. Okay, what do I have to do to get ready for this transition? It's an emotional thing. It's a physical thing. Every sense is involved, right? And that's hard to mix into like the day-to-day life. And the other thing is you're asking people to get ready for the scariest and worst thing that could happen, right? It's because dying is just, everybody at some level recognizes that when they pass away, they will have either no consciousness or like some blissful consciousness, depending on your view of faith. But these issues with aging are about losing autonomy, losing independence. That's just scary to people. And to me, it's as important that the people that support someone are prepared than that person themselves being prepared.
When you,
Some people have the emotional like composition to face the possibility of diminished capacity or like limited mobility. Some people have the ability to think about that themselves and prepare themselves for it. I don't think everybody does, but if the people around them are prepared, that's the next best thing.
so with an eye towards, again, trying to inform adult children and give them as much wisdom as we can impart
Yeah.
based on our experiences and positions, I'm curious, like, I my I think that you have a unique ability to lead people to the water so that they can drink.
Yeah.
And I imagine, like, practically speaking, when you're sitting with clients, that is, it's the client themselves.
Yeah.
And that's a really important skill set. And I know it's, you have the benefit of being a professional, a fiduciary. It's almost like when a doctor or nurse puts on the white coat,
Yeah.
there's a lot more designated to them. But I'm just wondering about thematically. One of the major impediments to older adults being planned
Yeah.
are the older adults themselves.
Yeah.
And you've got tons of adult children who are maybe going to listen to this.
Yeah.
And they're like, they won't listen. I've tried to talk to them. I'm doing my best.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to overcome that obstacle. And I'm curious if you have any, what you would say to that.
Yeah.
Any advice?
Well, I think it would be great for more estate planning lawyers to talk to their older clients about the reality of it, the opportunity for things to go well. And that's the thing we focus sometimes maybe on things going poorly. What are the bad outcomes? And talking about the positive outcomes, the things that are going to be better as things develop. Not just what's going to be worse, but the full picture of what life looks like when you age. I think a couple of years ago, I gave a talk to other lawyers called what we don't talk about when we talk about estate planning. And it had two really different ideas in it, but I got tired of going to these conferences where everybody was talking about the cutest new tax planning gimmick.
Right.
And so I started talking about two things. Artificial intelligence, the way that the technology was going to take over the sort of more monotonous aspects of the legal practice, and working with clients in vulnerable situations. You go to these conferences, 400 lawyers sitting in a room, and we're talking about a tax plan that will work for like 5 clients, right? And everybody in the room is going to have a problem with a child that has a drug problem, or a marriage that goes wrong, or they get older. So I've been encouraging people to talk about that with their clients. And I think we would do the world a service if people like me, who are estate planning lawyers, who have some people trust me because, like you said, I have the white coat effect. They're paying me by the hour to do my job. If I talk to them about, have you thought about what you're going to do? Have you talked to your kids about it? The thing that I really encourage people to do, I don't know if this is going to sound like a terrible analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway, because my family, we just adopted a dog 2 weeks ago. Great experience. I called a vet in Charlottesville, and the dog didn't need to go to the vet, but I had an appointment, and I walked in, and the vet was like, your dog's fine. I just got these records. He was just checked out 2 weeks ago in Richmond. What are you doing here? And I was like, I don't know when this dog's going to have a problem, and I don't want to be coming into your office the first time when I'm in a crisis with this dog. Like, why don't you meet the dog? It cost me $100 to have the appointment, which is not nothing, but like better than being in a pinch, right? Now the vet knows who this dog is. Likewise, I'm going to reach out to a dog walker or a house sitter. We don't need that. We're around. I'm walking the dog, throwing the ball. But there's going to be a time where I need somebody to help. wouldn't I rather know that this person can come over and like have the relationship established before I get into the crisis? I know you're shaking your head because I know this is what you want people to do. I think we do this in other areas of our life.
And we don't do it in this area because I just don't think people understand who the vet is and that there's a dog. I guess that's a question as much of a statement.
Yeah.
Like, I agree. There's not our understanding of this space is pretty limited as a population to senior living communities, which even they are misunderstood, but at least people know they exist.
Yeah. And they're misunderstood, but people know because you can physically see them. Right. And I would say that, I don't know if this is because when we met in that Starbucks in Richmond, whatever, I don't even know when it was, but when we met in that Starbucks, thanks, Jonathan Blank, if you're listening.
How about that?
Right?
Yeah.
I had never heard of a group like yours doing what you were doing. Since I've known you, I've learned about lots of other groups, and maybe I now know what to look for, right? Maybe because I met you, I was like, oh, this exists. Certainly you've introduced me to people in other communities that do the same thing, but now I'm like more conversant in what the language is. So I think we are I think you might be a little ahead of the cycle of like, you're early in getting the word out.
The educational cycle.
There's like people don't know that groups like yours exist, right? There's like, I remember driving down Midlothian Turnpike in Richmond where I grew up, and there were nursing staffing companies on Midlothian Turnpike. You would see the little billboard and there was the little office. I think a lot of people, that's what they connect with in-home care, right? Like a kind of, there's a place here and you call a guy with a pager who will get a nurse to come to your house. It felt like I'm sure they were doing the best they could. I'm not criticizing that. It was just the model was there. Now it's developed to be a more comprehensive set of services. And I think the market hasn't learned about it. It's not far enough into the market that it's commonplace.
I agree.
I mean, financial advisors should be doing this more than lawyers, right? Because I get one shot at a client, right? When they come in for an estate plan, some people, like super wealthy folks, I'll talk to them every week. But a lot of folks, they'll come in for a plan. I won't hear from them for 10 years, right? Accountants talk to their clients every year and probably are like the first to be able to see when a client might, or an individual might be losing a little bit of capacity, right? Because they see the same thing every year, right? Bring me your statements, and all of a sudden, are they more forgetful about what's going on? Or are they seeing more medical bills in their finances, right? Like accountants see people every year. Financial advisors are great about being in touch with their clients. To the extent that those folks became more knowledgeable about this and were able to, introduce it, like make it a more comfortable part of the conversation so that it wasn't so drastic and scary.
Yeah, I think it's a really clarifying observation. I think what's paradoxical is, and I find myself embarrassed about this, and I haven't really been able to figure out, kind of unpack that embarrassment. But I find myself uncomfortable by saying, well, geez, like the hurdle that one has to overcome to be better prepared for these challenges, meaning challenges of going from not needing care to needing care.
Yeah.
That hurdle,
whatever that looks like.
It's not a hard hurdle.
Right.
It's largely, as you said, it's largely like learning a language, but it's not that complicated. And so when I end up saying with folks, and it just feels odd, but hey, we've had this conversation. You're 80% prepared just by virtue of the conversation.
Yeah.
And it kind of feels self-aggrandizing, or it feels like to say to someone like, oh, well, you've sat with me and now you know that here's 3 things that you can do.
Yeah.
You need to start care early.
Yeah.
Because that's build that infrastructure before you need it.
That's right.
Nobody wants to do it. Okay. You say you don't want to do it. Fine. as you did with your dog, you
Right.
need to find a vet and you need to introduce yourself to the vet and you need to vet the vet.
Yeah.
Because then when something happens, you'll know, not in this parlance, it's like you'll know that a vet exists, which is not something anybody doesn't know when they have a pet.
And you know what? You have to fill out 1,000,000 forms at the vet. But
Right.
But now Boomer's in the system,
And now Boomer's in
right?
the
So I just
system.
call up the vet, and Boomer. Let me go back to this thing that I told you about a young couple that comes in. They're obsessed about this super low probability event, which is they're going to go to the beach without their kid, and they're both going to die in a car accident. It happens, I'm sure, but it's so low probability. Also, people, when they're talking about going from no care to care, they're going to focus on the lowest probability, worst outcome, right? I lose all of my mobility. I can't take care of myself. I can't shower by myself. These are like incredibly personal, incredibly vulnerable things. When in fact, going from no care to needing care might be as simple as having somebody come in and help straighten up around the house, make a sandwich, run to the grocery store for you. There's nothing vulnerable about that. It might actually improve your life, right? There's nothing, you can still go to the bathroom by yourself. You can still take care of yourself, but you just have somebody lightening the load. And I've said this to clients about it. I said, get somebody in 4 hours a day, or 15 hours a week doing little stuff. Then you get to know that person. You introduce somebody into the rhythm of your life in a way that is not scary, so that if it gets scary, you're not doing it for the first time. And you know what? It probably won't ever get scary. You might just need somebody to run to the grocery store, make sandwiches in your house, and then you pass away peacefully in your sleep. And wouldn't that be like a joy in life, right? To just have that kind of care, to ease the burdens of these little things, and then, but also you're making it so much easier if it does get scary.
And you are decreasing the likelihood that it will get scary. I mean, I know you said that, but it's
Yeah.
so true.
Right. Also, it might have this positive effect, which is makes your life better.
Yeah.
In such a way that you don't actually end up in a worse situation. Do you think Gen X is going to be more prepared for this than the baby boom generation? We're both solidly Gen X, right? I mean, I am solidly Gen X. I have older siblings, and so they even skew me like more into
More
Gen
older,
X.
yeah.
And so I just think that more people in my generation are maybe disillusioned to start. And so because they're disillusioned, they're willing to accept what the tragedy of life might be in a way that they won't be burdened the way baby boomers were, who thought the world was always going to be better, right? If you were in a generation where you were sold this promise that it was always going to be better, and now you get to the end of your life and it's like actually going to go the other direction, maybe there's this like generational mindset that individuals can overcome, but as a market, as a overall, what do you think about that?
I think it's really hard to tell.
Yeah.
And I think, what I've observed, my dad's baby boomer 75, and what I've observed in his cohort, my parents' friends' cohort,
Yeah.
firsthand. I mean, these I'll make an obvious statement, but it's hitting me observing it firsthand, is just how much people change when
Yeah.
they get to those stages of
Sure.
life. And I've tried to accept how nearly impossible it is to put yourself in the shoes of someone as they're 75, 80, 85.
Right.
Even if you're trying and
Yeah.
you're well intentioned. I assumed that the baby boomers would be rugged individualists, and that whatever they were going to do with this stage of their life, they
Yeah.
would decide. They would be really intentional about
Yeah.
it. It would be groups of people living in commune, like whatever, like the 60s version of 2025. And I'm not sure I'm seeing that as much. and likewise with your analogy, like what will the next generation do differently? I wonder. I've heard people hypothesize that they think there will be a readoption of a reconnection with or embracing the senior living community piece of it, because it does, at least in some ways, insulate family and friends. It provides that infrastructure that takes the load off of some family and friends.
Yeah.
I think it'll be fascinating to watch. I got into this space in 2013, and at the time I thought like, oh, the timing for this type of service is great. Like in a few years, like I'll begin to be responsive to
Yeah.
this kind of seismic tsunami of need. And the reality is, I think I'm still 10 or 15 years away from it today.
I think so.
Because it's really, obviously people are healthier, living longer, more fit. But also this type of care presents at 85, 86, 87. It's not 80. Occasionally it's someone that's
Right.
a bit younger, but by and large, folks make this transition of independence to need very late in life.
Yeah. What I think, going back to this idea, is that it would be so much better to start to interact with care even earlier, so that when you get to that point of need, it doesn't feel as like a cliff, right? It's a much more gradual, if people could embrace that.
That's the challenge. I mean,
Yeah.
that intersection of I don't need it, but I'm going to embrace it proactively, and with whatever freight loading that we can't fully understand about being 80
Totally.
and wanting to not need anything and
Right.
wanting to not change anything. Like those two things I can't describe it, but they seem so at odds.
Yeah. No, that's it. And I do, in my own life, I try to embrace the way that people can help me in my life. Like I see other people rejecting it, and so I'm sort of going, I think I'm capable. I can walk around. I don't need care now. But this idea with the vet, it extends to other areas of my life where I'm
Yeah.
like, you know what? I could do that myself, but why don't I figure out a way to have somebody help me with it? And I realize that it takes a little bit of my resources, money, but it gives me time. And I hope I can continue that. And I talk to people in my own cohort about like getting help.
Yeah, being a little bit more deferential, or being a little bit more
100 years ago, we didn't worry about. We lived in such a way that we lived with each other and in community in such a way that help just existed, right?
right.
And we don't. Like modern life is such that we're so at spread ends. Our friends and family are good, but they're not as present to that kind of care, right? That used to just be something that siblings would do for each other. Right now, we live in a different kind of economy and we're structured differently now. But getting used to that, I'm trying to embrace it now, so that it feels very normal to me.
Yeah, I hope
throughout my life.
Yeah, it's and it helps me understand your prompting earlier, which is just like, do you think we're going to be better at it? I hope we are, but I think that may be more of a commentary on your wise wiring than it is on our generation.
I don't know, but maybe that's the word to get out.
Yeah.
Maybe the word to get out is not just help get your parents ready, but think about how you can engage in the universe now with people to support you, so that getting support doesn't feel like such a bad thing in the future.
Well said. Thanks, dude. Appreciate you.
Yeah.